and welcome back to my channel where I'm going to cover the Cleric's Life Domain, a class specialization from the 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons Player's Handbook module. Clerics are one of the core classes within Dungeons & Dragons, and have been there for all, if not most, of the editions that Wizards of the Coast has published. With 5th edition, there are a number of class specializations that you can now choose from, and in this video, we will be going over the Domain of Life. However, Clerics work a little differently than other classes when it comes to their class specialization, in that Clerics don't gain many base class features, but gain more features and abilities through their domain than other classes do. Additionally, many of the features gained by the domain will typically complement or increase the effectiveness of many of the base class features. For instance, all clerics gain multiple domain-specific spells that do not need to be clerical in origin. However, they will function as a clerical spell while it is being cast. It is also the domain that fleshes out the Channel Divinity feature and adds capabilities to that to complement the underlying premise of the domain itself. With respect to how I'm going to organize the details of this domain, I'm going to only focus on the levels where something is gained, as the bulk of the changes your cleric is going to receive that are not domain-specific have already been covered in the base class videos for the cleric. If you have not yet watched these videos, I will provide a link in the description below for you to quickly gain access to them. With that in mind, let's take a look at the domain itself. Clerics gain their class specialization or domain at level 1, and this is due to the way that clerics gain access to their spells. When earlier editions were published, the concept was that clerics would call upon their gods to cast their spells. The gods would then use the cleric's body and soul to channel the spell to its inevitable conclusion, and that it was the cleric's prayer, or the act of casting the spell, that allowed that connection to happen. As I've stated before, with 5th edition, the gods are less involved, but still grant their worshipping clerics the means to cast spells on their behalf. Instead of the cleric themselves being the focal point of the spell, they now use a foci, much like other spellcasters of this edition, and the foci acts as the origin point for that spell. How you choose a god for your character to worship is entirely up to you, but with 5th edition, the domain is used as a guidepost through the suggested domains column here within each of the tables that represent the individual gods for various worlds. In order to access that table, all you'll have to do is click on the Modules button here, and if you don't see that, just simply expand out the Library button. Select the Player's Handbook, go to Reference Manual, and then expand out the Appendices section here. You will then see Appendix B, Gods of the Multiverse, and then the various tables that are associated with specific realms. So the Forgotten Realms is here, Greyhawk is a little bit below, there's Dragonlance, and then Eberron, etc., etc. It doesn't mean you can't select a god whose selected domain is different than the one that you have chosen. But as I indicated in the base class videos, if a player's selected god has no relationship to the domain that has been selected, then there could be, from a role-playing point of view, issues casting some spells. Those gods might simply refuse to grant that spell unless it in some way aligns with some otherworldly goal that the gods may have in mind. For instance, the god Bane might not allow a spellcaster to cast the healing spell unless that is in some way, shape, or form going to benefit Bane in some way. He would typically see that the wounding of one of his clerics would have been punishment for that cleric's failure. So it's kind of that concept that comes into play that the Dungeon Master is going to have to think of. Clerics of the Life Domain are those who work the hardest to help heal the sick and the injured, have even developed ways to reduce death in combat, and even remove harmful effects by making use of various spells. These are the best healers of the clerical domains, and they gain significant healing benefits as a result of their specialized training. As a cleric selects their domain at level 1, as I've stated earlier, I'm going to start within the character wizard so that you can see how that domain selection works. So give me one moment and I will set that up. Once again, I'm using the exact same stats and race that I had chosen in the previous videos. So I'm going to go ahead and select Cleric, and as soon as I do that, we will see that our clerical specialization here pops up. Before I choose that, I'm just going to quickly select my proficiencies. It will be medicine and religion in this case. And then I'm going to choose the life domain. And as we can see, unlike other domains, this one doesn't trigger any additional selections through this screen. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to finish off this character, and I will bring you back once I've got that character created. At level 1, your character is going to gain access to 3 features. One called Life Domain Spells, another called Bonus Proficiency and in brackets Life, and the third called Disciple of Life. And the first thing we're going to look at is the Life Domain Spells feature here. What you get when this happens is that you're going to gain all of these spells at various levels. So when your character reaches Cleric level 1, Cleric level 3, Cleric level 5, Cleric level 7, and Cleric level 9. And we will cover that during each of those levels here in this video. And these spells are meant to complement the selectable spells that your character has access to through the normal Cleric's spells table, in that these spells are given to you and do not count towards any spell preparation that your character has to do. They are considered prepared all the time. This means that your character can choose to cast any one of these spells as long as you have that as part of your repertoire, and as long as you have an appropriate spell slot that has yet to have been used. I highly recommend creating a spell group that is specifically set aside for your domain spells, and this is so that you can keep track of them and ensure that they remain separate from your normal spells list. And that's because these spells are not one you're going to normally change out like you would with a typical clerical spell, and are intentionally being granted by your character specifically through this domain, thus they should always be there and be prepared. Additionally, by creating a separate spell group, you can create separate linkages between groups. If I were to drag in, say, this Lesser Restoration spell, you can see here that it's going to create a level 2 spells group. However, with this particular spell, it's meant to be prepared all of the time, and right now it is not. Before I go through and show you how to fix that, I just realized that Bless and Cure Wounds are spells that we're automatically gaining, so I just have swapped out the other spells, and just in case you caught that on the screen. In order to create a spell group for these particular spells here, what you're going to want to do is drag Bless into place first. You're then going to want to update the name of the group itself to Life Domain Spells, and you're going to want the word spells there. The reason being is that here you see the keyword spells. When we add in an additional spell, it's going to continue to go through and add additional groups when we drag something that's a higher level into place. It's going to be a clue to you that those are spells, not features that are coming through your clerical domain. With our spell group now in place, I'm going to drag in Cure Wounds, and then I'm going to go ahead and modify this particular power group, because right now that's what it is. It creates a power group by default. And the changes that I'm going to make is, first, I'm going to convert this from an abilities group or power group into a spells group. And you do that just simply by left-clicking on this icon here. Additionally, I want to ensure that all of these spells make use of and are linked to our wisdom stat. And that's because when it comes to clerical spellcasting, that's the stat that gets used. This way, any bonuses that any of our spells are going to make use of are automatically going to be linked against wisdom, as well as any saving throws that your character is going to force someone or something to make. With respect to that, they will be a wisdom-based modifier, which is going to calculate the total DC for that saving throw. And once we get to level 3 and we drag in the rest of these spells, I will go ahead and explain what happens when you do that and why we have created this separate power group in order to create separate linkages. The next feature your character gains is the bonus proficiency feature. And this bonus proficiency feature grants your character the means to wear heavy armor. And if you think about it, in a way it makes sense, as the idea is your character has to be around long enough in order to heal those who are in trouble. And the heavier armor helps provide better protection, at the cost of stealth. As a healer, you don't necessarily always need stealth. You're most likely already in the fray of battle, so having stealth at that point would be pointless. Setting this up is actually fairly straightforward. If you look at your abilities tab on your character sheet, you will see that we already have light and medium armor here. To add in heavy armor, all we have to do is hit enter once to create an empty space and simply type in heavy armor. Do not hit enter when you do that, otherwise you'll get another empty space. Just hit the tab key once you're complete and it will auto-complete that and sort that for you. And I don't mean auto-complete as in completing the word, I mean auto-complete as in finalizing the entry. The good news here is that when you're going through and creating your cleric, chainmail armor, which happens to be one of the heavier armor classes, it's right here, is an option that you can select while making your armor selection during that creation process. So there's no need to go through and add this through any additional means. Just be sure to select it at the time that you're creating your character. The last thing you will want to do, but you shouldn't have to really do anything, you're just double checking here, is to make sure that this proficient symbol is down here at the bottom. And the reason for that is you want to ensure that you're going to be proficient with the armor that you're wearing and that it has picked up that there is now a stealth disadvantage, because chainmail is one of the ones that has stealth disadvantage associated with it. However, everything else should be configured appropriately, and you will see that our armor class in this case is AC 18. The last feature that your character gains at level 1 is called a Disciple of Life, and it provides a healing bump for any healing spell that your character casts, and it's not restricted to specific healing spells. Any spell that restores hit points can gain this benefit, which is a bonus of 2 plus the spell's level. So if you cast a level 4 spell, you'll be able to add 6 additional hit points to that healing spell. The catch with this feature is, how do you determine what level dictates the bonus? Is it the level of the spell slot that was used, or is it the level of the spell itself? The answer is both. The reason why I say that is because when you use a spell that has the ability to be cast at higher levels, you're going to be consuming a higher level spell slot. For example, let's say that you had a level 3 spell slot available and you were casting Cure Wounds, and you decide to make use of that level 3 spell slot in that casting. When you do so, that spell is effectively level 3. Thus, you would be able to add 3 points to the 2 bonus points you're already getting, and then add that total to whatever you rolled for this particular Cure Wound spell. Unfortunately, there's only this +2 bonus that is already set up. I'm going to go ahead and modify this as well as show you what I'm doing for the first couple in order to set this up for an appropriate configuration that makes it a little bit easier for you. The first thing I'm going to do is ensure that I bring this up so that it is equal to a level 1 spell. I'm simply going to add 1 to that bonus. I am then going to go ahead and add in 8 more of these healing effects. And the reason why I'm doing that is I'm literally going to make this a 3, 4, 5, all the way through to an 11. And to show you what that looks like, all I have to do is click this plus item here, make sure that I put in a 4 here, and then repeat for all of the remaining 7 entries here, such that it looks like this. Now all you have to do is that whenever you're in a specific combat scenario and you have to go through and cast a Cure Wound spell, you can add on the appropriate bonus that would be equivalent to the level you cast. So if you cast a level 1 spell, this would be the one you chose. If you cast it as a level 2 spell, this would be the one that you would add. And all it does is prepare things in advance so that you don't have to worry about modifying this later on. It's done, it's ready to go. To show you how this works, what I have done is I've gone ahead and set up a simple combat situation. And I've preloaded 200 wounds on this ancient brass dragon and temporarily made this dragon an ally of our cleric. As my character is a life domain cleric, whenever I go and cast this Cure Wound spell, I can simply drag over an additional bonus hit points that get thrown onto that character or that creature. If, and let's once again assume that I have a level 3 spell slot, I choose to cast Cure Wounds as a level 3 spell slot, all I have to do is left click once and holding down that left mouse button, drag out so that I get access to this dice. I then right click 2 more times to add in 2 additional dice. I can then drop that into place. That will roll the healing, and then I have to make sure I choose a level 3 modifier and drop that into place to represent that I use that spell as a level 3 spell. It's a reasonably simple feature to use, and once you have this preset, you're essentially good to go. At Cleric level 2, your character is going to gain the Channel Divinity feature through the base class, but it's also going to gain a second version of that Channel Divinity feature through your domain. To complement the Turn On Dead capabilities of Channel Divinity, your character is going to gain the option to Preserve Life. And what this feature does is that, as an action, your character can present their holy symbol to those on the field of battle. They can then channel their divine energy into healing energy that is equal to 5 times your character's clerical level. For instance, at level 2, that would be equal to 10 total hit points, but at level 20, that would be a total of 250 hit points. You can then select any creature that is within 30 feet of your character and divvy up those hit points between them. But there's a specific process on how that is going to work, and what I'm going to do first is level our character up, and then show you how to add this feature to your character sheet, and then show you how it actually works. First, let's do the leveling. So I'm going to go ahead, apply level 2. Relatively simple. I do want to add another level 1 spell here. I'm going to go with Shield of the Faith for now. And now our character is level 2, so the easy part's done. As soon as we leveled our character, both of the Channel Divinity features got added to this particular Cleric Actions and Effects group or power group. I want to make a modification to this, and that is simply because both of these two options share the use of Channel Divinity, meaning that if you were to use Turn on Dead, you would not be able to use Preserve Life, or vice versa. If you were to use Preserve Life, you would not be able to use Turn on Dead until, in either of those cases, your character completed a short or a long rest. To do that, I'm going to temporarily switch this back to Group, and I'm going to move Turn on Dead into something called Channel Divinity. I am then also going to copy this feature, or group name I should say, and paste it into this. And that way, both of these features are part of the same power group. I am then going to modify this power group to ensure that it is linked against our wisdom score. And I'm also going to set up one rest-based use. And you will see that we now have a pip here that is next to our two features. I'm going to shorten up this name because there's no point having Channel Divinity there and there. And the reason why we do this is because whenever one of these features gets used, it's also going to use the other feature in the sense that it removes the capability to actually use it. And that's what I mean by it shares the use of. Both of these features share the use of Channel Divinity itself, not get the ability to be cast individually each time you go through and do something. There is, however, a minor correction that I want to make here. With this, it's just simply selecting our character's level. But there's a multiplier that comes into play. If you recall, it's 5 times your character's level. All we have to do is add in a 5 there, and now it will equal to whatever level our character is going to get, times 5. Here's the problem with this, though. This is only going to work if you're going to load up all of these points onto one single character. And there's also a catch with how that is going to function in the sense of you can only restore a creature up to no more than half of its maximum number of hit points, meaning that if a character has a total of 10 hit points and they're at 4 hit points, if you drop this 10-point healing bonus on them, if you will, they're only going to get 1 hit point back. They're not going to get 6 hit points. As a result, all this is really going to do, unless you're actually dropping it onto a single character, is give you an idea as to how many total number of hit points your character can heal. When you go to use this feature, if you're in a situation like this, where a particular creature has definitely way more than 10 hit points before they're going to be equal to half of their total number of hit points that they need to be healed, you can simply drag and drop that into place. This is how this is going to help. However, at around 148 hit points or wounds, that's going to be equal the halfway mark. You would not be able to apply anything that pushed them past 148 wound points, meaning you couldn't push them down to 147, for example. But because I was able to successfully use this with respect to our Ancient Brass Dragon here, I now have to tick that off, and we can't do anything else with this particular feature until our character now completes a short or a long rest. The last catch is that you cannot use this particular feature to heal anything that is undead or a construct. So all of the remaining creatures that are inside of, well, with the exception of maybe this dragon here, that are inside of this combat tracker, I wouldn't be able to go through and heal because the bulk of these are undead. I might be able to heal the Shadow Daemon. I'm not sure if that's a construct or not. But the adult green dragon here can definitely be healed. Why you'd want to, I don't know, because I don't believe adult green dragons would necessarily be friendly to our character. Now, let's say, for example purposes, obviously these dragons might not necessarily have this low a number of hit points, that you want to use this particular feature to heal these two creatures. With respect to the adult green dragon, they can accept up to 5 more hit points before they would breach the agreement that you would have with this particular feature. This one, on the other hand, could receive roughly 2 or maybe 3 hit points. I would argue that it would be 2, but some DMs might allow you to go to 3. That means out of your total number of 10 hit points that you can heal, you're going to use anywhere from 7 to 8 hit points, leaving 2 unused. That's how this is going to work. When you get into that kind of quote-unquote divvying of the number of hit points, the Dungeon Master is going to have to come into play. So I've brought up the Dungeon Master's combat tracker just so that you can see what this is going to look like. Let's say that you choose to heal both of these characters or creatures. Then you would only be able to apply 5 hit points here. And let's say that you have a Dungeon Master that doesn't round down or round up appropriately. And they say, nope, 15 divided by 2 is 7.5. That means you can only heal it by 2 more hit points. Then you would be forced to simply apply 2 hit points to that healing. If, however, you have a Dungeon Master that accepts that you could theoretically add 3 hit points to them, then they would set it to 7. That's how that would work. And it's the Dungeon Master that has to make that adjustment unless you want to go through and create a temporary heal effect that's going to heal those specific values for you, and you just simply modify it each time you apply it. For example, let's go ahead and show you what that might look like. I'm going to go ahead and create a temporary healing effect here, and then I'm simply going to add in 5 to represent the amount of healing that I'm going to do to the first dragon. Next, I would then take that same entry and modify it, and once again, if you have a Dungeon Master that rounds out differently, you would be using 2 or 3 here, and then you simply drag whatever the determined value is onto the remaining dragon. It doesn't take an overly long period of time, you just have to keep track as to how many hit points are going where. And it shortens it up so that the Dungeon Master doesn't have to do anything, you just calculate it out, throw the values into place, and away you go. Granted, the Dungeon Master is probably going to double check that on you, but beyond that, it should be a fairly simple process. And as before, you would go ahead and then tick this off to indicate to the Dungeon Master that it was used. At Cleric level 3, your character is now going to gain their next set of domain spells, and in this case, it's going to be the Lesser Restoration and Spiritual Weapon spells. I'm going to quickly level our character up so that we can take advantage of that. I'm then going to make sure that I select my first level 2 spell, and it shouldn't be the Lesser Restoration or Spiritual Weapon spells if they happen to be in this list, and in some cases they will be. For this particular domain, most of the spells will be clerical in origin, but they don't always happen with respect to that. There we go. I am then going to go ahead, minimize everything except for this domain spell group here, and drop in my new spells. And this is what I meant by linking of spell groups. As we can see, it created a new life domain spells. That actually probably should be life domain. Let's do that. There we go. And as you can see, by changing that one name, it has also changed it here, so I don't have to modify that. That shows you how linked these two groups are. Additionally, if I change this to Charisma for some reason, if I look at this particular spell group configuration, it will now show that it is configured for Charisma. But if I take a look at this spell group here, it will still be linked to Wisdom. So these 3 spell groups here, the cantrips, level 1 and level 2 spells, are linked to each other, but these 2 are linked to themselves. So I'm going to set this back to Wisdom so that it's properly configured. At Cleric level 5, your character's also going to gain their next set of domain spells. In this case, it's going to be Beacon of Hope and Revivify. So let's go ahead and quickly level our character up. I already took care of level 4 off screen. Add in 2 spells because I forgot to do that. So one will probably be from here. And then this one will allow me to select it here. There we go. I am then going to simply drag our new level 5 spells into our new power group to give us a level 3 spell group. And as you can see, it's extremely uncomplicated once you have this configuration in place. All you have to do is just ensure, oops, I actually wanted to minimize that. Just ensure that these configurations are set, and then it just becomes a simple drag and drop, and everything is set up for you to use. At Cleric level 6, your character is going to gain a new feature called Blessed Healer, and it will help you sustain your own life whenever you're attempting to sustain the life of others. What I mean by that is that when you cast a healing spell that is level 1 or higher, your character is going to receive 2 hit points plus whatever that level of that spell is, while your character is in the process of healing another character or creature. This isn't going to work whenever you're casting a healing spell on your own character because it's already assumed that you're healing yourself, so this feature won't come into play. It's only going to work when it's on another creature or character. And the calculation for that is going to be extremely similar to what we have with respect to Disciple of Life. So you can either choose to use this, or I'm actually going to cheat a little bit, and I'm going to drag and drop this into place so that I get a copy of it and simply call this Blessed Healer. And that way, all you have to do is drag and drop this onto your character whenever you run this spell. It might not, however, be a bad idea to go through and ensure that this description for Blessed Healer is actually in place with respect to this Otherwise, you'll get yourself confused because it originated from the Disciple of Life feature. To do that, you can simply modify the description down here to be equal to this. And in order to gain access to this, you're probably going to want to copy this into place and then pop that open, because then you'll be able to gain access to its description. So I'm just going to simply copy that, and then simply replace that. Relock that into place, and then delete this. That way, if I pop this open, I can now say that it is on my character, whereas with this particular one down here, Disciple of Life, that's on other characters or creatures. One thing to point out is that I forgot to show you how the leveling up process works. It's very similar to what we've done in the past. When you go through and actually level up to level 6, it's going to add Blessed Healer into this power group. It made me realize that I skipped a step with respect to these, because this targeting should be set to self, because it is only going to be applicable to your own character. And that would allow you to also differentiate, I can't say that word, with respect to the two features, Disciple of Life and this one. So you'll just want to make sure that you quickly modify these and then go from there, and you're done. At Cleric level 7, your character is going to gain their level 7 domain spells. In this case, it is going to be Death Ward and Guardian of Faith. So I'm going to go ahead and level our character up here. I am then going to go ahead and drag these two into place. Death Ward and Guardian of Faith. At Cleric level 8, your character is going to gain access to their next feature called Divine Strike. And this feature will allow you to add supplemental damage to any weapon once per turn. In this case, the damage bonus would be 1d8 points of radiant damage. And the weapon that you need to use either has to be a ranged or melee-based weapon, not a spell. And the reason why I say that is because right here in the description it says with a weapon attack. That means that you're using a weapon, not a spell. So let's go ahead and level our character up to apply this change. And what we should see is that Divine Strike should already be there, and it is. It's right here. It is also set up correctly, meaning that we don't have to do anything in order to configure it at this level. There is an adjustment we will have to make at level 14, and I will show you what that looks like. So how is this actually going to work? Well, I'm going to go ahead and attack Skeleton 11, and I can either target it or just simply drag and drop the weapon attack on it, like this. Doesn't really much matter which method you use, but your attack has to hit. So let's say it's the next round, and I attack again. Jeez, that's still a miss. Third round? Nope. Our Cleric is not doing so well when it comes to attacks. There we go. That's going to be a hit. Perfect. Now, before I actually roll this damage, I'm going to want to click this effect, and you can see it's going to pop up here. It's also going to go away whenever our next roll occurs. That's why we want this in place before we roll our damage. I'm then going to drag and drop our damage into place. You will see it will roll an additional 1d8. The effect is going to go away, and we've done more than what we could have had we just used the club. If somehow you happen to have 2 attacks during a given encounter or round, you would not be able to use this again until the next turn came around. If you took advantage of an attack of opportunity, for example, you would not be able to use this effect if you used it during your main attack round. This is something that can literally only be applied on one weapon attack per turn. Just remember that you have to click this effect before you roll the damage. Otherwise, you're going to have to do some additional manipulation in order to actually trigger a roll and get that applied to the target in question. In this case, it's just easier to remember to click this, then roll the damage. At Cleric level 9, your character is going to gain their last set of domain spells. And in this case, it's the Mass Cure Wounds and the Raise Dead spells. So let's go ahead and level our character up. Going to go ahead and choose a level 5 spell. Let's go for Flame Strike, commit that. I'm then going to go back to our action sheet here, expand out one of our domain spell groups here. It doesn't really matter which one you use. And just simply be sure to drag and drop your spells into that same power group, or spell group rather, so that it creates the appropriate matching group. And that's everything that you're going to gain out of your life domain spell feature here. At Cleric level 14, your character is going to gain an increase in the amount of damage that Divine Strike can do whenever you execute a weapon attack. So let's go ahead and level up our character to level 14. And then I'm going to go down to actions. When we do this, there is a small chance that Fantasy Grounds might duplicate this effect. If it does, just simply remove the extra one. It has only happened to me once, and that was when I was preparing the script. But an update has occurred since, and I might have fixed that. I'm not entirely certain, because I did write the script a while ago. All you have to do is modify this effect here, so that instead of doing 1d8 of radiant damage, it does 2d8 points of radiant damage. And when your character goes through and executes their weapon attacks, so let's say I'm going to attack this vampire here. Okay, that's a hit. Before I roll that damage, I'm going to ensure that I apply that effect and then drag and drop the damage there. And we can see that we have 2d8 die that get rolled and add on the additional damage. And the good news for us is that radiant damage should not be resistible by the vampire. The reason we're seeing partially resisted is because I'm using a non-magical weapon here. But that's how you would go through and ensure that the extra damage is in place. And finally, the last feature that your character is going to gain is called Supreme Healing, and this is going to occur at level 17. What this is going to do is cancel out your need to roll any sort of healing dice when it comes to actually executing a heal. So let's go ahead and level our character up. Now this feature isn't going to be a feature that's going to get added to our character sheet, and the reason for that is that it's meant to modify all of our healing specific spells with respect to the amount of healing points that you actually make use of whenever you're healing a character. And what I mean by that is that when your character would normally, for example, let's say that you're casting Cure Wounds here, you would normally roll 1d8 points of healing damage, roll being the key word. In this particular case, what Supreme Healing allows you to do is simply make that an 8. You don't have to actually go through and do anything else. What you as a player are going to have to do is simply pop this open, clear out the dice roll, and what you do is you right-click on the field that contains the dice, simply hit the erase, and then you add an 8. But the change is that you no longer have to roll dice. I would recommend that you take advantage of this change at this level and go through and prep all of your spells to take into account any and all levels that you might theoretically decide to cast that spell at. So, as an example, if I were to consistently use this Cure Wounds as a level 2 spell, what I could do is simply make sure that 16 is here, and then make sure that base is there, and it's already preset for whenever I go through and cast this as level 2. I don't have to manipulate this in order to actually figure out what that is meant to be. It's already done, and you're going to want to do that for any of your healing spells, and it does not matter whether it's a domain spell or whether it's a spell that you have down here. For example, when I leveled up, I took up Mass Heal. I need to go through and ensure, oh, it's already maxed, so never mind. Let's see, is there another level one here? Yeah, Heal. I don't think Heal has a max. Yeah, oh, it does. It's at 70. Anyway, you get the point. You have to go through and identify all of the healing spells that already are not configured to be a max stat heal and go through and make that modification. A Cleric of the Life Domain is generally an absolute requirement when you're dealing with a fast-paced hack-and-slash based one-shot or campaign-based kind of configuration, where the party members won't really get a whole lot in the way of downtime to catch their breath. As such, these clerics have gained the abilities to help maximize the effectiveness of any healing capabilities that they decide to take advantage of and make use of. And this is essentially the quintessential concept of what a healer is in Dungeons & Dragons. However, this does bring us to the end of this video. I hope you found it useful and informative, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one. I want to thank you for watching this video, and if you found the information useful, click on that like button as well as leave a comment below, as it helps the channel gain exposure. Also, consider subscribing, as I release content similar to this topic quite regularly on the channel.